we are seeing the most astonishing thing in Australian history. Out of sheer superstition, out of vanity, out of willful ignorance, our political class has decided to make us poorer and weaker. Most importantly, they've decided to get rid of our reliable electricity. Electricity used to be about the cheapest in the world. Electricity that made us so rich, that let us set up smelters and car plants and factories of all kinds, that gave us jobs. And they're going to get rid of this cheap and reliable electricity without, and get this, without having anything reliable to replace it. Nothing. It really is that crazy, and I'll show you in a second. In fact, these fools, and I use that word advisedly, these fools, including our current Energy Minister, Chris Bowen, they've been giving us green projects year after year that one after the other have failed or have blown their budgets or are years behind or just simply pie in the sky. I've never seen anything like it. It's like some mass delusion. And journalists are sitting there not seeing it, not reporting it, thinking, oh yeah, that's just the way the world works. It's a farce. Except there's nothing funny about it. I mean, look at your power bills. Are you laughing? Look at the jobs already lost. Is that funny? And today, more warnings of what we're doing to ourselves in this religious mania, this totally fake belief, this superstition that there's some global warming existential crisis. And the way to save ourselves is to get rid of coal and gas and petrol. The head of the government body meant to oversee our electricity supplies today said, whoops, we really are running out of electricity now. We're running out as early as 2 years from now for some states.
What we see towards the back end of the decade is increasing reliability gaps as these coal-fired power stations retire. And those gaps hit every mainland state in the national electricity market.
But then, up popped Chris Bowen again. He's a real global warming zealot. So optimistic, still telling us, don't worry, it's all going to plan.
'Tis but a scratch.
A scratch? Your arm's off.
No, it isn't.
Well, what's that then?
I've heard worse.
Apologies, that was the wrong clip, of course. That was Monty Python. It'll be hard to tell the difference, but this was Bowen today.
This transition to renewable energy needs to be faster than it has been over the last decade, much faster and much more orderly and reliable than it's been over the last decade. And that's what we are achieving.
They are achieving that. No, they're not. All these green schemes that you've had to pay for, just look at them. You really think these guys know what they're doing? Does it look like they even care how much they waste, as long as they look like planet savers, gods of the new green religion? Now, if you think I'm exaggerating, you have not been paying attention, because this hoax has been going on for more than a decade in which our politicians restricted gas exploration and helped destroy 1/3 of our coal-fired power stations. And they're not finished yet. At least 5 of the remaining plants, including the biggest in New South Wales, are planned to close by the end of this decade. So now, if you've still got faith that the politicians know what they're doing, let's look at what they've said will fill that giant hole in our electricity supply. Let's look at this long record now of monumental incompetence and delusion and waste, starting with the Rudd Labor government and ending with the worst of the lot, this Albanese one. First, geothermal power. Remember that? That was going to save us. In 2007, Tim Flannery, who Labor made our chief climate commissioner, said we could power the country, the whole country, for decades on geothermal power, using the energy of hot rocks deep underground.
There are hot rocks in South Australia that potentially have enough embedded energy in them to run the Australian economy for the best part of a century. But the technology to extract that energy and turn it into electricity is relatively straightforward.
Straightforward? You know, the Rudd government was actually mad enough to believe him and gave $90 million of our money to a company to build a geothermal power plant in the very area of South Australia that Flannery recommended. But the wells collapsed, the share price collapsed too, and the project was abandoned. There's no geothermal. Next scheme. The Rudd and Gillard governments then decided to fund wave power generators driven by waves and tides, and the water is free. How could this not work? Except they didn't. Some crashed and even sank, one off Port Kembla, another off the South Australian coast, and a project of West Australia also failed. No wave power. Oh, back to the drawing board. Then came Liberal Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull, another global warming believer. Next scheme, his Snowy 2.0, essentially a giant battery. 104 kilometres of tunnels linking 16 dams and 7 power stations in the Snowy, and then using wind power and solar power when it was very windy and very sunny to push water from a low dam up to a dam higher up, so that when our cities really needed electricity, we could let that water fall down again to drive generators. Turnbull had saved us.
I am a nation-building Prime Minister, believe me, and this is a nation-building project.
Oh, yes, no. That project has in fact turned into a total disaster. Turnbull said it would cost just $2 billion. So far, it's costing $12 billion, 6 times more. Almost certainly will cost much more than that. Turnbull said it would be finished by 2021, 2 years ago. Instead, it's years still from finishing. In fact, the way it's going, it might never be finished. Example, one of the 3 tunnelling machines, it's got digging those 31 kilometres of tunnels, has managed to get just 200 metres in 1 year, a few centimetres a day. And it's now stuck, hopelessly stuck, can't move. On we go. The Albanese government is now in huge strife with its Rewiring the Nation project, building lots more poles and wires to hook up this Snowy 2.0 and all those other solar and wind farms it's expecting to be dotted around the country. Now, Labor said that project would cost $20 billion. That already looks like a complete fantasy, given that every big transmission project so far is blowing out. For instance, HumeLink, connecting this Snowy 2.0 with the grid. Without this, it can't work. Was meant to cost $1.1 billion. It's not finished, already blown out to 3 times that much. Same story with the new undersea interconnector between Victoria and Tasmania. Also costs 3 times more than we were told. Then, another one. Brilliant. All those solar farms the Albanese government is counting on to give us twice as much renewable energy in just 7 years than we have today. Now, its crazy plan means we're going to have to install 22,000 solar panels every single day for the next 7 years. 7 years. But oh dear, the cost of solar panels are now rising because there's a worldwide shortage of the stuff and the minerals to help make them, the rare precious earths. And when the government cheered on the biggest solar farm of them all, by the way, Sun Cable, meant to sell solar power to Singapore because we were going to be a net exporter of this electricity, that quickly collapsed as well. And now Minister Bowen is admitting, actually, there's another problem. We actually face shortages of the equipment we need for all these new solar farms. And, oh no, we're also going to be too dependent on China for nearly all of it. Security risk. Honestly, it's hard to believe this nonsense, but it's real. And if it's not enough, there's now a big pushback from residents who don't want all these solar panels and these wind farms vandalising our landscape. And the government even admits now that more than 24 renewable energy projects already face bans for wiping out koala habitats. Will no one think of the koalas? Are you getting a picture here of total incompetence, of not facing facts, of confusing dreams for reality, of destroying what works without having a clue how to replace it? I'll give you one more example. Last one. Of all this pig ignorance and this blind zealotry, the Kurri Kurri plant. That's a new gas plant in New South Wales. It's meant to stop the state running short of electricity when the giant Liddell coal-fired power plant shuts down, hey, just this April, only a couple of months. Well, this Kurri Kurri plant was supposed to open this year, take up the slack. Now we're told, without explanation, it won't actually open until late next year. Another problem. Chris Bowen said, well, this Kurri Kurri plant got to go green. It's going to have to use this new green hydrogen, has been told, a miracle green fuel made from water, promoted by billionaire Twiggy Forrest. What could go wrong? Well, lots actually. Lots. Because Bowen has just been told there's no way it can handle a gas as volatile as hydrogen. This plant can't do it. And but guess what? The first expert to try to tell Bowen that hydrogen wouldn't work got the boot. You can't tell this bloke anything if it doesn't fit his dream. Meanwhile, of course, your power prices, they're soaring. Government spending on these mad green plans is exploding. And we face power shortages very soon that could cost a lot of people their jobs. Chris Bowen, the Albanese government say, we've got this, we've got it, we have a plan, it'll all be sweet by 2030. Scoreboard says none of them have a clue. They haven't had for a decade. One green scheme after the other failed or in strife, costing billions more than promised, and who's going to pay? Well, that's you, isn't it? Isn't it time you told them enough?